Good morning, I'm Sarah Bean, editor of FMJ, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar, Moving from Reactive to Proactive Services, Identifying Energy Issues Early and Automatically. Building Management Systems, BMS, are at the heart of a building, monitoring and controlling lighting, ventilation, heating and air conditioning. This is why it's so important to detect and deal with any concerns before they become issues. The BMS needs to be equipped to do this before a problem occurs, and that can be done with the use of alerts and energy management support services. This webinar brings together a digital energy expert from E.ON, along with FM thought leaders to discuss how the latest tech can help FMs move from a reactive service to a proactive service. I'll be putting a series of questions to the panel, but would also love your input. So please do post any queries or comments and we'll get to them towards the end of the session. I'd like to now ask the panel to introduce themselves and their organisations. And if we'd start with you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. My name is Nick Westlake. I'm a service and energy delivery manager for E.ON Controls. I've worked for E.ON for just over 12 years. I thought if I could just spend a couple of minutes explaining who E.ON Controls are and what we do. At our core, we are a controls company. We install, we commission, we service, we integrate control systems within our client sites. This has allowed us to build a range of services that support our clients. And if I can just touch on four of those to start with, the first of which is our Energy Management Centre, which is a centre in Glasgow that support and connect to over 6,000 buildings in the UK, as well as some in Europe. We have a team of technical support engineers that deal with events at customer sites and can react to those through those building connections. Second part of our business is our reactive and site support teams. We have 9 offices around the UK that go out and carry out service, PPM, reactive visits. The third part of the business is our projects team. This team will go out, carry out building surveys, identify opportunities in terms of controls and integration at customer sites with the aim of upgrading. And the fourth is our energy team. And I think we're going to probably expand on that a little bit more today, about some of the energy works that we do, both with our energy platform Optimum, as well as some of the energy works we're doing with our clients. In terms of clients, we have a variety of different businesses that we work with, many household names from the high street, in retail, hospitality and leisure. We work in public sector, we work in defence, so quite various types of clients that we work with. My particular role within E.ON is to support those clients, to ensure that as a business we deliver on the things that we're contractually obliged to do, and just to make sure that the customers receive the very best service from E.ON. I think, yeah, I'll cap it there as my introduction, if that's okay.
No, that's brilliant. I'm actually going to move on to David next. I was going to, because David's one of your customers.
Yep.
And I think it's going to, if you kind of talk to us, your area of responsibility and how that fits into this discussion.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Dave Cermak. I'm a senior facility manager for David Lloyd. So I oversee the northeast of England directly, but then I also oversee the northwest, Scotland and Ireland, and the east region. There are 10 facilities managers across the business. And yeah, in terms of my relationship with Nick and E.ON, we work quite closely together in terms of they do a lot of remote monitoring for us and controls, and we've had quite a good close working relationship for many years now. We also have another wing of our sort of business, which is the sort of utilities team, who also work very closely with Nick, but they're much more based on the sort of finance side of things in terms of investment and capex and whatnot. Whereas we, as facilities managers, make sure our members have the best possible experience every day in terms of comfort, whilst also ensuring that we optimize our utilities usage.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. And on to Sunil, who I'm sure many of our viewers already know, but he's here to represent both the SFMI and also, I think, this, the work that you've been doing in the Good Practice Guide for the IWFM.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. Thanks very much, Sarah. So yeah, my name is Sunil Shah. I'm the founder and owner of Acclaro Advisory. So we're a sustainability practice and we provide sustainable solutions to a range of organisations. And part of the work that we do is the SFMI, which is focused towards the FM sector and the operational buildings activities. It's the only group specifically for the FM sector around sustainability. And I'll come on to talk some of those areas a bit later on during this hour. And then my broader background is getting towards 30 years now, which is worrying, of working in sustainability within the built environment. So leading positions within design, constructs, planning, and operational footprints. And as part of that, I've also sat in a number of government task forces looking at sustainable buildings, how we define them, how we implement them. So again, I'll talk through some of the learnings that have come through from that as well.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Nick, when we began talking about, the topic for the webinar, you mentioned that when it comes to managing BMS, when you talk to clients, being more proactive was their top priority. Can you give us some sort of live examples of some of the scenarios you've come across with clients and what they're asking for?
Yeah. Probably just paint the picture first of all is that obviously there are obviously number of benefits from identifying problems within buildings as early as possible. You can improve the comfort, you can reduce the complaints, you can improve the energy and reduce the waste. Traditionally, BMS systems have been used to kind of react to stuff. We get thousands, our energy management center get thousands and thousands of calls a year from a variety of clients where they've been too hot, the buildings are too hot, they're too cold. And we react to that. We react to something happening within the building, it becoming an issue for the occupants. And that comes through to us, and then we investigate that remotely to see if we can perhaps resolve that or we can identify what's gone wrong. So, there's a few things that happen until it kind of is highlighted as an issue. As we've seen over the years, the control technology improve. It's better, it's smarter. Our ability to connect to multiple buildings has improved. We've got access to data and analytics that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago. So the kind of opportunities have increased for us to identify things much earlier. To give you an example, I'll probably use the leisure sector. One of the most important thing for David Lloyd is member experience. It's very much at the forefront of their priorities is to ensure that their members have a good experience whilst they're in their club. Things such as water temperatures, be it a shower or a swimming pool. We were talking just before the call. If those temperatures start to drift, start to move away from what their comfort policy is, that's when you'll start getting complaints. And we react to that. It becomes a complaint. Somebody within the club will raise a work order, will investigate it, and so forth. But the way it's changing, being more proactive, is actually using, the BMS data to kind of tell us what's happening rather than the club telling us what's happening. The result of, water temperature dropping is usually a result of several other things further, down the line. We will check, is the boiler running? Are the set points correct? What are the flow values or the return values? What's the position of the valve? So we can do all of this. And what we're looking to do, or what we are doing, is automating this and providing smart alerts so we identify these issues much earlier rather than later.
And it's really timely actually having this conversation because it has been so cold. We haven't had as cold start to the year for a long time. And anecdotally, we're getting reports of people saying their offices were too cold, places were too cold, and even in our local leisure centre, people complaining about the temperature in the pool because a lot of local authorities are sort of keeping the temperature down. So I mean, it is a real issue. I wanted to talk though in general terms at this stage about how important energy management is to FMs, and one of the reasons we're having this discussion. And so now I think it'd be good if you kind of talk a little bit about the framework and why it's so important, because you also acknowledge some of the members, some of the people who are actually doing good work in that respect?
Yes. Sorry. So, I mean, from the SFMI perspective, we've looked at decarbonisation as one of the key pillars for the SFMI and a key area for the FM sector to move ahead on. And we do look at energy management, carbon management through a number of different lenses within the SFMI itself. And I think that reflects on some of the elements that Nick was talking about as well, of the experience and how individuals interact with energy. So parts of it is around the energy and carbon management, the strategies, the forward planning that does take place. But we also start to look at projects and the delivery of projects and the expectations of what's coming through. And more importantly, are we looking at alternatives rather than like for like? Are we looking at different ways of how we deliver towards the end goals of reduced energy and reduced carbon? We also start to look at skills and competencies that are going to be needed for this. For both of those areas, they are complex areas, the developing areas, and it's not something which an FM has all of that knowledge about. So how do you reach out? How do you know and what you don't know as part of that? It also talks about risk and the level of risk that an organization is willing to accept and understand, and then to be able to implement some of those different strategies. So again, talking about the control strategies that might be in place. And then finally, it's about the level of ownership from the business. What level is coming from the CEO, CFO to also to implement for those changing activities? How much will they support the FM team? Because when you start to talk about some changes, temperature levels and so on, that's got to also be backed up by the business. So all of those elements come together into a successful energy management, carbon management sphere and delivery program. But they're all small elements that need to knit together. So the role of the FM as well is to coordinate a lot of those bits and pieces together.
Brilliant. And David, that actually brings us neatly to your area of responsibility, because you've got to ensure that your premises are keeping clients happy, but also I know that David Lloyd has actually got a lot of energy management and sustainability initiatives, because you're having to eat a lot of energy in order to provide hot tubs and saunas and all that side, but you've also got to look at what effect that's going to have in terms of reaching net zero and sticking to your sort of corporate responsibility in that area.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, in terms of we have sort of two wings, as I said earlier, right? So we've got our sustainability and utilities team, and we've got our FM team, right? And so, in terms of net zero and 2030, our sustainability team have got some big initiatives to decarbonise in terms of we're putting in air source heat pumps. Solar panels will be about 40 completed by Q1 this year. Four heat pumps have gone in already. There's another 12 this year by the end of quarter 2. So there's some big initiatives there to sort of bring our carbon footprint down. And that is offset by the fact that, you're right, I'm in David Lloyd Newhaven State, which is in Edinburgh, and it's freezing. I went for a run along the seafront this morning, and their outdoor pool is open and it's steaming and it looks lovely. But obviously, it takes a lot of gas to heat that, yeah. And it's about balancing that expectation of how we do it. So it was a few years ago. It used to be a club decision if they kept their outdoor pool open in the winter or not. And a lot of clubs would close their outdoor pools in the winter because it saves money, which is fine. But then David Lloyd decided, no, it's one of our unique offerings. A lot of places can't offer outdoor pools, so we have to keep them open. So how do we do that? And so we've standardized the set point across the business. The set point is 26, and it has to be. A lot of pools were running at 29, so it has to be 26. And we can take away that local control from the club, because otherwise, you get GMs trying to keep their members happy because they know there's 30 older women doing aqua, so they want to turn the temperature up, because they don't want to deal with them at reception afterwards. But to take that control away and make sure that we can remotely monitor it means that we can keep those pools open and minimise as much as we can our carbon footprint and our costs as well, of course.
That is really interesting. I mean, it is that real fine balance. If we talk a little bit now about the main issues with existing BMS systems, and I've referred to the fact that it's been really cold, so I imagine there's been an awful lot of issues for a lot of buildings. But they're seen as a sort of black box by building users, but problems, operational and technical inefficiencies happen. Stuff I've heard about is things like systems where it's been rescheduled to come on during the night during one period of time, and then nobody's ever bothered to sort of fix it back. It's a real basic one. Can you talk about some of the issues? I mean, I think I've got a list here. First of all, the first one is it's not always clear what the BMS is doing or how it's making decisions. Nick, if you want to sort of give us an overview of that.
Yeah, I think one of the most important thing in my first point in regards to BMS and the challenges that we face is just to make sure we've got, an up-to-date BMS, and there's an up-to-date BMS strategy. I think sometimes this is actually overlooked. Across our client portfolio, we see a lot of different control systems, and systems that are of varying degrees of age and technology. There's still control systems out there that are 20, 25 years old, that are running, that are still functional. I think traditionally BMS systems, they get replaced when they fail rather than necessarily getting replaced because they're old and they don't have the capability. That's from our perspective, that's changed. A lot of our customers over the last 5 years of cyclical programs of replacing their BMS, and they are seeing the benefits of that. What you can do with newer BMS systems is you can do so much more in terms of connectivity and the strategy, some of the things that David was mentioning there, but you can make global changes across an estate. You can do load shedding programs. You can't do that with, control systems that are 20, 25 years old. So first of all, it's important from a BMS is what type of system and what capabilities that you have. A point you just made there, Sarah, as well, is we're also seeing changes to buildings in terms of how they're being used and how they're being occupied. Again, probably a good example is with David Lloyd, where perhaps they had one of the studios might have been used for a spin classes for a period, and then it's been changed to use a low impact yoga class, for example. The comfort of that room changes depending on how it's being used. So it's very important to make sure that the BMS strategy follows that, which is not always the case. And also how the building's been occupied. So we see a lot of changes since COVID, where maybe spaces are not used in the same way as they were before. Maybe offices are closed 1 day a week or they've reduced hours. But unless your strategy and your BMS is updated, you could be wasting energy, heating or cooling a space that's not been occupied. I think as an industry, we've probably been a little bit slow to visualize that for our clients. That has changed a lot. I know we were again talking just before the call about one of David's clubs. He can go onto our Optimum platform now, and he'll get up to date temperature information for most of the rooms within that club. He can see exactly what's going on, what the set points are, what the boilers are doing, for example. So there's been a big drive on the BMS front to make data much more available and visual to end users, to regional facility managers, so that they can actually help manage their estates better.
That's really useful. Actually, Sunil, that's the data stuff, that is really key as far as you're concerned. And I know I've just mentioned it's been very cold recently, but that's a short-term thing. What about sort of long-term data planning for things like hybrid working, times of the year, multi-site management, all that? What are you coming across in terms of the issues for people when they don't have the right BMS in place?
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges that we have is the BMS can provide some really, really good information. I think the examples that Nick and David have both given, which is you're able to use that data for decision-making purposes, and it might be short-term, fix an issue, the heat within the swimming pool is too low and you can fix that, or it might be as part of longer-term decision-making of we'll open up the open-air swimming pools. It will have a financial impact, but actually the brand supports this overall. To do that, you need to have good quality data to inform the decision making and what the business then comes out from there. I think one of the challenges that we have, you mentioned about the black box scenario, the maintenance of BMSs commonly isn't in place. We've come across a number of BMSs that are still under design mode. when they've been installed. I think that a really good example is went into an organisation. The BMS was installed 18 years previously, and it was still in design mode, and it had 3 chillers running during winter. And nobody had looked at that because the assumptions was somebody else was going to be looking after it, updating it, and maintaining it. So a key part of this is about what's important for the organisation. What things do they want to be measuring? Start small, and then look at where the BMS is able to capture and look at that data. You want to understand the data, but also the reasons why buildings are behaviour led. They're different. It changes from external temperatures, people within it, how the building is being used as well. And all of that contributes to changes that needs to happen. And the data helps you to understand why the building is operating the way that it is operating. And if you can start to answer those questions, actually got a really, really good understanding, you can provide that advice back to the business about what changes would happen and the implications for them.
Brilliant. Just a reminder, there's some questions have already been asked. Do keep putting your questions up and we'll get to them later. Nick wanted to make a point.
Yeah, just a point Sunil made there. I think for us, this is one of the big benefits of being able to have that remote connection to our customer sites, is that it does allow us to do, we almost like do a remote PPM twice a year, once in the summer months, once in the winter, where we can check that the comfort policy is still in place, nothing's changed. So we can, we optimize and we go through the settings and we do make sure, the buildings are as they should be. We can't adjust for if a room's changed and we don't have that visibility remotely unless that information is passed to us. But the actual settings on the BMS and how those areas are controlled, we do check, but we can only do that through the remote connectivity that we have to our energy management center.
Actually, that brings us to David's situation. Obviously, you're managing a number of sites. That remote connectivity must be essential, especially, do you use it as well to sort of preempt issues that might come up?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think E.ON's Optimum platform that we use has developed quite a lot over just the last couple of years, and it's great. And we've got two sort of views. We have a view which is less technical for our sort of the general managers of our clubs, and it is like a red, amber, green platform, so they can log in the morning and they can they can be at home and they can say, oh, anything that's green is okay. Obviously very easy. Yeah, it was foolproof as possible for our general managers. If something's amber, you're looking at, oh, that might be a problem, we might start getting complaints, the club room's a little bit too cold, too hot, depending on the time of year. And red is obviously, we're way beyond parameters and we need to get there. So straight away, I've sort of pitched it. I've done a lot of training with the general managers across sort of multiple sites in terms of, if you use this on a daily basis and you give your team access to it, they can literally, from the comfort of their office, they don't have to walk around the club and go, God, this studio feels hot. They can say that studio is hot, and they might see that before our members have had their first class and jump on it. And then the sort of second platform that we use, which is a more in-depth technical view that I have, is I use it probably more than I should. I'm on it all the time, checking if things look like they're out of parameters, or someone will text me about a problem like, a spa pool being too cold. And it's really great for diagnosing what, a pool is a great example, right? Because we've got a heat exchanger, we've got a swimming pool, and that's it, right? And we get pool contractors to come and fix it, and they will blame the heating engineers, and we get heating engineers to come and fix it, and they'll blame the pool engineers. And the remote monitoring, straight away I can look at it and go, right, the primary flow temperature of the heat exchanger is as it should be, the heating valve is fully open, etc., etc. I think that this is a pool engineer problem rather than a heating engineer problem, and I couldn't have done that a couple of years ago. And what you'd end up doing is the pool club would pay twice for two different engineers to come out and point fingers, whereas now I can diagnose and say, I'm fairly confident it's this. And sometimes I'm wrong, don't get me wrong, but that's the way of the world. And they'll send someone and it'll get fixed, and it's great. And in terms of, I don't know, today I had a complaint from a club that a pool is slightly too cold, which is not ideal. But I used the remote monitoring to go back to this time last year, and I can see that it's exactly the same temperature as it was this time last year. So as much as it might be a bit too cold and we need to sort it, I know it's not a, oh my God, something's broken. Yeah. It's more of a commissioning issue, and so it's, it's really useful, and it's to make it as foolproof as possible for certain users, but then to have the technical in-depth ability that I have to look at stuff is great.
Brilliant. Nick, you had something there?
Yeah, just to kind of add on to David's point there, the other benefit that the system that he's talking about is David Lloyd's contractors have access to this system. So the companies that they're working with that are carrying out their HVAC support, they also have access. So rather than having to to phone us to be able to check a temperature or to check if
Yeah.
something's enabled or a valve position, they've got access to that information themselves. Which is obviously very useful to them and kind of reduces their time as well because they're not having to wait on a call or to find out what the BMS, they can find out themselves.
Yeah. And David?
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, that we've got in across our plant rooms where our BMSs are, sorry, we have a QR code displayed, and so any contractor can come in with their phone, and they can see the full dashboard, and it's a time saving thing, because we do get this not just with swimming boards, we get it with a boiler engineer who's blaming a remote control engineer,
Got a blame going around.
yeah, there is a lot of that because no one wants to fix anything, do they?
Yeah.
And that's great because it keeps me in a job, doesn't it? But yeah, in terms of the accessibility, as a QR code, and straight away you get a visual, and even our club team members can do that if they need to. I probably wouldn't trust them doing it half the time, but it's there and it's accessible, and that's the key. It's the accessibility, so that we can diagnose things quicker and plan for the future.
Brilliant. Well, we've covered kind of moving from reactive to proactive. I wanted to talk more about energy management software, and Sunil, I thought I'd give you the task of explaining the difference because we've been going on and on about BMS, but really what we're talking about, the solution is EMS.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, a BMS, and you explained it at the beginning as well of the webinar. So, I mean, ultimately, it's the control systems for the energy consuming elements within the building, HVAC, lighting. It can also cover things like fire systems, security systems, and elements within that as well. And its design and requirements is to make sure that the building is operating effectively. It looks after occupant controls and also make sure that the overall system is working together. So, in order for that to happen, you've got to have the black box, the BMS system, and that needs to be configured to the way that you operate your building. The alarms need to be set up, the set points need to be set up. And then as your building changes, that also needs to be updated as well. So the important elements there is about commissioning, and importantly, it's seasonal commissioning as part of that.
Brilliant. So that's great. Thank you. Nick, if you can talk about the Optimum EMS, because that's what the first discussion that we had when you were describing what it did, and obviously this is the product that David's using.
Yeah, obviously, there's lots of different energy management platforms out there. Ours, it's been in place for longer than I've been with the business. It's a product that we develop in-house. I would probably say one of the differences with our system is that, obviously we come from a BMS, and we've developed the energy platform to support both us internally as a business, but with our clients as well, rather than there's a lot of systems out there that will come from it from more of an analytics view, but not have the BMS kind of knowledge and experience that we do. Our system's changed quite a lot over the years. I would say probably the biggest change is the amount of things that you can now plug into an energy management system. Traditionally, it would have been your utilities, your gas, your electricity, your water. You get day plus one half-hour kilowatt data. That was what a traditional energy management system was. But now, yeah, we are taking weather data, which is really key, which is used for a variety of different reasons. We take data from the BMS, so where sites have sub-metering, which is really, really great. If a building has sub-metering, there's so much more you can do. We're taking information David mentioned about air source heat pumps. We're seeing a lot of clients obviously installing air source heat pumps, and bringing that data into our platform kind of allows them to help commission those systems as well, because you can view obviously a wide variety of data linked to that product over a period of time in over a period of different conditions. You don't need to be on site, you don't need to be plugged in. The data collects and you can view that remotely. We're seeing obviously on-site generation information into the platform as well, from solar, CHPs, heat pumps. So yeah, there's a lot more information that's coming into the platform from a client perspective. We're also taking information we deal with a large hotel chain in the UK. And on a daily basis, we're getting occupation in terms of rooms, covers for the restaurant. So all of this information, when you're viewing and you're looking at energy, it allows you to build that picture. You know, what is the energy consumption of that building when the occupation is at a certain level. So it kind of allows you to start making decisions. You're better informed to make decisions by adding these additional kind of elements into your energy management platform. So, and we do that. All of this information is available to make those decisions.
Brilliant. I mean, Sunil, would you say then that when it comes to the data side, is flexibility really important because you're dealing with a lot of different organizations which are trying to be more energy efficient from both a sustainability and cost perspective? How do you advise them to decide on what data they need? Because we always talk about being sort of data deluge.
Yes, and for pretty much all organisations, they have too much data and too much information. So certainly, it's about starting at the organisational level and saying, what's the strategic drivers for the business? What are they trying to achieve? So lots of organisations will have carbon targets or other environmental reporting parameters, but they've also got some metrics in there from a financial perspective as well. That helps a business to understand what's going to be the critical parts that goes on into the business. There may also be elements in there which talks about productivity or operational performance as well. So from that, it's then moving its way downwards. So what's the data sets that we need to be able to go back to the business, say we're performing and managing this well, and where within either the building management system or the energy management system do we have that data and can we visualize it? So in most cases, the organizations won't have all of that information. So some of it will be in place, but you will need to go out and to get the rest of that data and the information to be able to prove back to the business. But what it shouldn't be is just take the data you have and work with it, because that inherently means that you're missing out on some of the key pieces which the business needs for its own decision making and its progression way forwards.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's useful to know. Nick, can you describe some of the data that can be captured, the sort of energy data? Because you're dealing with a very wide range of clients. Obviously, I'll come back to David in a minute about the David Lloyd thing, which is so energy, it's energy is so important to you as a business, but you talk about hotels, retail as well, you mentioned before as well, but when we chatted that, I mean, things like keeping retail places warm, but not burning energy with the doors being opened all the time, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it was a good point made by Sunil there in terms of you can get a little bit data overload. Quite quick to talk about data and getting as much as possible, but I think it's important how you use that. And there can be at times too much information. In terms of our retail clients, the importance of temperatures within sales floors are always important. Things such as when things have been enabled on is very important as well. And probably a good example is with AC systems. One of the biggest issues we have across a number of our clients is when AC systems are being overridden. Sometimes they're actually unplugged. A variety of reasons that may have occurred. But what actually happens is AC systems, they just continuously run. And that obviously increases the amount the assets are running. If they're running constantly in heating or cooling, it affects obviously the life cycle of those products. For the occupants, it might improve comfort, but to the detriment of wasting energy and heating and cooling spaces that are not required. Either the building may be shut, which is quite common. There are a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit still out there in terms of issues at client sites. As I said, AC, HVAC systems running in unoccupied spaces is probably a fairly fairly common one. So having access to that kind of information, when is it on, when is it running, and linking that, it becomes very powerful when you link that with your energy data, taking your BMS and your energy, and you can merge that into one platform to see what's causing the other.
Yeah. But David, I mean, one of the things obviously you mentioned earlier about general managers, and so I was sort of interested in the sort of operational side. How confident are FMs that you work with are dealing with these new technologies, and is there a sort of big learning curve to get some of these systems up and running? Because I mean, in your job, you're sitting monitoring this, you're obviously used to doing it, but there must be people you're dealing with who are not.
Yeah, I think generally like the FM team in our business anyway, all I think facility managers in general are inquisitive people and they want to
Yeah.
learn and take on new things and always better things. And so actually I don't
Mm.
think there's an issue there in terms of learning new systems and gathering data and analyzing data and deciding what to do with it. The problem is how we dilute that down to the club level. Because at the end of the day, if you're and I'm not picking on general managers, but they're the people I deal with in the clubs. If you're a general
Yeah.
manager of a club, you are managing the entire club.
Mm.
Right, and so you've got targets to hit, finance, blah blah blah. You don't want all this data about look, this cooling valve is 20% open, this heating, but all you want to say really is it as it should be, okay? And what we're doing as a business trying to change is like when we as facilities managers get all of this data and our sustainability team get this data to package it to them in such a way that they can appreciate the impact. And for them, 9 times out of 10, the impact is financial. Obviously, we've got our carbon neutral targets and whatnot, but for a GM's perspective, it's financial. So if we can say to them, look, this AC unit is running more than it should do. We'd forecast you'd use this many kilowatts of electricity a day, and you're actually using this much. This is the cost. Over a year, it's cost you this much. That way, suddenly, ears prick up. Oh my God, AC's turned off. We find out it's been unplugged from the BMS, and we react, and that
Yeah.
helps quite a lot, you know. And just to touch on something Nick mentioned earlier in terms of, you know, data and what we can do with it. I think there was a good example recently in one of my clubs where there was a air handling unit serving a club room where our members sit and enjoy their coffees just like I am now. And there's also an AC unit, a split cassette right next to it, and they weren't tied into the BMS at this point, right? And so the AHU was heating. And it was blowing onto the sensor of the split cassette, which was then cooling, and they
Yeah.
cancelled each other out. No one noticed. It was enough lovely, comfortable things. They're cancelling one another out, but it wasn't until we got the BMS sort of upgraded and tied in that straight away you could see it. Well, Christ, that's, you know, God knows how long that's been doing that for because no one's noticed.
Yeah.
And so that is a very low hanging fruit, as it were, you know. So yeah.
Sunil, you must get this when you're dealing on the consultancy side. Go on, give us some more stories.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, we were doing some work with one of the large retailers. So we had a number of roles. One was around some of the renewable technologies, the installation of those across the portfolio. But one of the low hanging fruits was the BMS and restructuring the BMS. And similar to what David mentioned, you know, you had the hot air that came out from the bakery, and that was then being put into the cold aisle of where the fridges and freezers were.
Yeah.
And so you had this, and the reason why it was set up is as part of the original design, it was you would vent out the bakery to the
Mm.
left of the bakery. In the design of that store, though, the left of the bakery was into the cold aisle areas. And so that was a reconfiguration of some of those spaces. And we
Mm.
had multiple times of heating and cooling taking place. Overall, some of the diagnostics which we did there, the revision of the BMS systems and getting that right sized for the way the portfolio operated
Yeah.
was around a 12% energy saving that came from that exercise. And I think one of the challenges that we had that came from that was how do we communicate that back up to the business? 12% is a massive amount of saving, but it's not very sexy to have a photograph of a building management system. It's much nicer to have a certificate or a nice shiny
Yeah.
system. That became one of the challenges that we had there. And in response for Dave as well, what we also did on the site there was we connected the energy savings through a visualization package and program, but then connected that out to the bonus for the manager for the building.
Mm.
So that way, then they had, as you say, their focuses upon the cost of running that building and everything, the experience that goes on in there. The
Yeah.
energy is a key part of that. Once we tied that into the bonus, all of a sudden it became a two-way conversation. They would come back to us, say, what else can we do to try and reduce it? Because they knew that they could also benefit from some of the changes as well.
Brilliant. Nick, you were going to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on a point that Dave made before about hidden issues. I think due to the fact that we have, the BMS has been very reactive, those kind of things we wouldn't have picked up on. Nobody's complained that the heating system and cooling system are fighting each other because the environment, is perhaps fine. Energy would be high, but maybe that's been the norm for quite some period, and nobody's ever really kind of looked into it. By kind of using the BMS data, those are the kind of things that we're now picking up, which we wouldn't have picked up before, being just dealing with reactive work orders. We are picking up stuff that is hidden, those hidden kind of energy issues or operational issues.
I mean, I suppose we've talked about retail leisure. What about office workplaces, Nick? Again, I'm being anecdotal here, but it's been very, very cold recently, and offices were much harder to heat. Do you get to a situation with the EMS where it decides on the optimum temperature, and then people have to sort of flex a little bit? That old adage about, the women all wanting it to be warmer and the men all wanting to be colder, that kind of thing, just put on a cardigan, Is that
Yeah,
still a thing?
yeah. I'm kind of working closely with our energy management center. Yeah, I can see that. You see that firsthand. You could get two telephone calls in one day. Somebody complaining it's hot, somebody complaining it's cold, and you've not actually made any change.
Yeah.
So that will always be the case.
Yeah.
And I think what's important, really important for any kind of company, particularly big national multi-site companies, is having a comfort policy. Our comfort policy is to, it goes below 19 degrees, for example, we heat, it goes above 24, we cool. And there's a policy in place that you can work to. And then obviously having a remote team that kind of help manage that, and any exceptions that might need to occur is probably where the value gets added. We had a store up in Elgin yesterday, which is in the north part of Scotland. It was less than a degree yesterday afternoon up there, and they were struggling with temperatures, really struggling with temperatures. The systems were in heating. There was little you can do from a controls perspective. The main issue, they had a number of HVAC systems that were actually unoperational, which was the main cause of the issue. Changing a set point, made absolutely no difference whatsoever. But we can provide that level of information remotely. There's nothing, sometimes the controls, they're doing as much as they can, and we do see that, particularly the start of this year, if the systems are in heating, and the spaces are still struggling with temperature. There are a couple of options. We can, bring heating systems on earlier in the day for stores that have got particular issues, and we can run them longer to help, with the comfort for those occupants. But yeah, it is, particularly the weather that we've had this winter and obviously last summer. It is challenging for people that manage buildings. They weren't necessarily designed for -10 and 35 degrees. So it is a challenge.
Absolutely. David, you were going to add to this?
Yeah, I was going to pick up on what Nick said actually about sort of set points and whatnot, and the really useful thing about sort of remote monitoring in terms of, we might get someone reach out and say, can you please raise the set point of our pool hall, let's say, because it feels cold, okay? And being able to remotely see and say, well, the set point is 30 and the room is 28, but the heating valve is 100% open. It has been for some time. It's not going to do anything, and actually the E.ON team, if they're reached out to, will say that. So there's no point. It's obviously an issue with it might be, and we might be able to diagnose that by saying, oh, look, the boiler flow is too low, and we can then daisy chain along and diagnose the problem, which is really good, because Yeah, we do get like Nick said, it's a bit like Goldilocks sometimes across our state when you'll get an email in the morning saying somewhere's too hot, and 2 hours later an email from someone else saying it's too cold, and literally nothing's changed. And it's
Yeah,
about having a brand standard and saying, to be honest with you, I'm not going to pay any attention to this. If it's within the parameters that it's supposed to be, you need to deal with it. You might like the changing rooms to be 30 degrees, I don't know, but they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be 22. And it's amazing how different temperatures feel just based on if you're a bit chilly and you walk into a room, it suddenly feels really warm when actually it isn't. It's just because you're cold, and we get
sure.
that a lot. We get that a lot with swimmers, especially people
Mm.
who use the outdoor pool and go, oh, it's lovely and warm. Actually, it's not. It's colder than it should be, but it's bloody freezing outside.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's really useful to be able to remotely see and then decide, do we have a problem or don't we?
Brilliant. Sunil, I wanted just to flag up, we're going to sort of moving on towards the end. We're going to talk a little bit about long-term sustainability goals,
Yeah.
and then we'll take some questions. Now, Sunil, you've got this report, which I think is really going to be useful for a lot of people, FM Leader Zero and what really matters in sustainability. And can you outline the areas that were of most interest to FM and FM providers in terms of the sort of decarbonisation technologies that are, and skills that need to be
Yes.
made to
Yeah.
do this?
Yeah. So we've looked at, so decarbonisation is one of the four material issues that we've identified for the FM sector. And so for that, that includes the buildings, that's scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. In that includes vehicles as part of that as well, and supply chain. From a buildings perspective, the trend that we're seeing in the near term is around optimization of buildings. So capital spend is slightly reduced, and it's much more about how do we improve the operational performance of the building. So an awful lot of what we've been talking about today forms part of where the sector is starting to move towards. And that means it's the return on investment tends to be certainly sub 3 years, sometimes getting towards sub 18 months, using the equipment and the information that you've got, and then how do you improve it? So an awful lot of this is about the experiences that both Nick and David have been talking about, using the data, making sure that the systems are being set up correctly, and then being able to diagnose where some of the challenges are. Overall, and if I go back to some of the government work which has taken place, there's a really, really good report called the Building Performance Evaluation Programme. And that looked at a whole range of different buildings from design, construct, and then into operation. Metering and BMS systems was one of the three key issues for failures of buildings to achieve their intended goal and purpose. And the reasons behind it are no different to what we've all been talking about: poor commissioning, and then the handover of that knowledge into the operations. O&M manuals not being correct and up to date, as built drawing. It's not in here quite a lot, as I mentioned in this. And so, there are a lot of these practices which we need to understand from an FM side. Is it affecting us or not? If everything is okay, that's great. Then we can crack on and start to make some of these changes. But if we don't have correct O&Ms, if we don't have correct as-built drawings, we don't know if our interventions are going to be correct or not. So actually, there are some interventions that might need to take place first before we then start to move on, implement, and drive forward. Again, that comes back to the conversation that we have with the business. Do they truly understand the position that we're in?
Yeah.
And then the timeline of the program to be able to move on.
Brilliant. Thanks. We're going to be doing, just to let people know, we're going to be doing a podcast next month or towards the end of this month, which will be available with E.ON again, where we're going to talk a little bit more about the tech side and what's coming up. But I wanted to put Nick on the spot meanwhile and ask him, can you give us some ideas, like sort of snapshot of some of the innovations that you're seeing coming through in smart energy? Because you guys are at the forefront of that side.
In terms of smart technology, it is obviously quite a broad subject. In terms of the BMS, the kind of things, connectivity and integration, definitely seen a lot more development on the sensors and devices that we're able to connect to. Some customers are using things such as wireless LoRaWAN sensors, which, you know, there are sensors that can do pretty much anything in terms of occupation, PIR. When doors are opened, the kind of opportunities are endless. There are obviously some good benefits for the customer for using this type of technology as well, in terms of installation cost, and the ability to kind of add multiple sensors. From our perspective, in terms of optimum, a big development has been on smart alerting. We've talked a little bit about alerting. Traditionally, again, BMS has been like one-dimensional alerts. If it a sensor reads more than X, then send an alert. But what we are developing is this smart technology where we use and/or strategy, so that we can look at multiple BMS points.
Yeah.
So just to give you an example, we can check: is the building occupied? Is the boiler running? Is the flow temperature above set point? Is the valve open? We answer these questions, and then it kind of gives us a better answer. One of the things David mentioned is being able to direct the building users to, we've got a cold shower. What do they do? Where should they check? And being able to build these smart alerts and check all of these different things, we can actually direct them to what we think is the root cause of those problems. So those are the types of things in terms of smart technologies that we're seeing at the moment. Do you want me to talk also about some of the stuff that I think is coming up, or?
A very brief overview. We will be delving in a bit deeper on it when we do the podcast.
Yeah. So very quickly, we have clients talking to us about new lighting technologies, rather than just having lighting levels for occupied, unoccupied. Different lighting scenarios is a keen topic. Companies are talking to us. Building optimization based on outside conditions, being able to change settings within a building to respond to weather events.
Very key at the moment.
Yeah, another thing that seems to be getting a lot of discussion as well: interaction with CRM systems. So actually using energy management and platforms to, we identify an issue, and then there's obviously a few things that need to happen before somebody actually goes to site to resolve it. It is looking at the integration and interaction between energy management systems and CRM systems to actually generate work orders automatically. I think that's a discussion that's going to be ongoing as well. I think that's probably an interesting topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and probably the last one is just about load shifting, the ability to work with like flexibility markets and stuff, which needs your BMS to be able to respond to things quite quickly. So that's another topic that we're looking to explore in a bit more detail.
Okay, I've got some, thanks for that. I've got some questions here we'll sort of whiz through. Here's a question to the panel. In your experience, what are the most common causes of buildings operating inefficiently? Sunil, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So there's been a bunch of reviews that have been done around ESOS exercises recently. So that's the Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme, which is a government regulation, and also the Carbon Trust, when it was a government body in the 1990s. They both came up with very similar things, which is around 20 to 25% of energy in a building is wasted through heating, cooling, lighting, and control systems. So those are the four areas that need to be looked at. Typically, you'll find out that buildings are being run outside of their core hours. You've got timelines far in advance of buildings being warmed up, brought up to temperatures. You've got fighting of systems, heating and cooling, that's taking place both at the same time. You've got overlighting that is occurring. Lux levels are much, much higher than they need to be within the spaces that they need to. And the control systems itself isn't correctly managing the way that the building is operating.
Right. There's a few questions here about connectivity. To Nick, I'm liking the rationale behind an energy management centre and function. Would this involve the complete control of the site-specific and operational BMS? In other words, to utilise the E.ON functionality, would it mean E.ON would have access to the BMS So that could go to David as well, really.
Yeah, the answer is yeah. We would need to
Yeah,
connect
yeah.
into the building's BMS system. There are more than one way of doing that. Some customers we use SIM card technology to connect. Got quite a few customers that do it that way. I think the key thing here is these connections are super secure. There's a lot of security around being able to connect to a building and control HVAC and lighting. That's at the core of any connectivity. Other customers we connect via their own networks. Yeah, there's a number of customers, but in theory, yeah, we need to be able to connect to that building's BMS, and we as a business can work with lots of different types of control systems, not just one or two. We can connect to quite a few different types.
And somebody asked a question about, it's quite a long one, but it's talking about the importance of water leak detection that interface with the BMS. David, have you had issues with that? You're dealing with a lot of water, let's face it.
Yeah, that's something that we're probably a little bit behind the times with in terms of water leak detection. It's a massive focus as a business in terms of bringing our
Mm.
water usage down because water costs money, and
Yeah,
also, most of our water is being heated, so we've got double spend there. We are putting sub metering in across a lot of our clubs, and then that sub metering helps us identify where those leaks could be. 9 times out of 10, it's swimming pool related because that's the
yeah,
biggest volume of water. But at the moment, we're sort of limited to, we do have smart metering, so we can see that, we're using too much water, it's out of hours, it's probably a leak. But then from there, it's sort of like trusting the FMs and the club to identify where said leak is. Saying that, I mean, a lot of the time it is things like, we can have dripping taps and showers and things like that. And it's explaining to the club level that, over the course of a year, that tap has used just as much water as if you burst a pool pipe for an hour. If your pool pipe bursts, you'd get it fixed immediately. So why don't you
yeah.
fix the tap? Because it's the same impact,
Thanks for the questions. I don't have time to do any more, but what I'll do is I'll keep them and then put them to the panel separately. So then when we post this up, which will be available on our website, you can get your answers then. I've got one last question to the panel, a bit of a round robin one, and this is a real basic one, but is how can FMs persuade their CFOs that investing in the latest EMS technology is worth it? Because it is going to take an investment, not just in money, but in time and effort. Um, let's start with Sunil, because you're talking to a lot of clients, then David, and then Nick.
Yeah. So again, there's a good practice guide from IWFM, which I prepared on this as well. So a lot of it comes down to confidence, giving confidence to the CFO. So that means it's the numbers, but it's also the wider rationale that goes to the business. So when we start talking about the energy management, a lot of it is not just the energy savings, but it's a lot of the wider benefits that comes through. So you've also got carbon reduction, you've got well-being benefits and productivity from improved environmental conditions within space. You've got compliance,
Yeah,
you've got meeting up with corporate targets. So it's making sure that it's not just about the money in a single sense of energy, but it's money in the wider sense of the benefits to the organisation.
right. David?
Yeah, to be honest with you, exactly the same in
Yeah,
terms of it's great to be able to show a return of investment and say, if you install this, you're going to make your money back this quickly. But it's also great to be able to show that, if we have the controls and the data, we can make sure our members, which we have a lot of, are happy. And if they're happy, they're going to stay and they're going to pay their membership fees and they're going to sit in a club room and drink 7 coffees in a row like I have today. And it all,
yeah.
and there's a wider impact, isn't there, to
Yeah,
energy management and making sure that we can sort of see what is happening and therefore control it,
yeah. Brilliant. Nick, you must talk to a lot of potential customers and existing customers who are saying, I really want to invest in this. What is the sort of the key thing for me to say to the CFO, this is worth doing?
I'd obviously reiterate the points
Yeah,
the guys have already made in terms of there are a lot of hidden benefits of having an up-to-date control system. You see if you do an LED upgrade or an HVAC, you can see the big drop off in energy straight away. BMS is obviously probably slightly less in terms of that kind of impact, but being able to connect buildings, being able to make these changes things like reducing, we haven't talked about, but like reducing call outs for the vast majority of our customers. 75% of the calls that we receive can be resolved over the phone. Either we can remotely make a change, a temporary change to the software. It might be just advice given to an HVAC engineer, or it might be an override for a temp. So we can reduce the amount of times that you're sending people to site as well. So that's another kind of benefit that you don't necessarily see in energy, but a benefit to the FM team. We touched upon earlier life cycle costing as well. If your building is running as optimized as possible, then your assets are not running when they don't need to be. You don't necessarily see that straight away as an energy benefit, but you're maintaining your AC and your air handling units much less, they last longer. So there are a variety of benefits. And going back to the point David made, the fact that you can actually visualize what's happening within your building, and you can start bringing that data in with energy data. I think that's a big selling point for anybody that holds the purse strings.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's a great way to finish. Thanks to the panel for their brilliant insights. Anybody who's jumped in late to this or had to leave early, you can watch this webinar again. As I said, we will be doing a podcast talking a bit more about the tech quite soon, and anybody who's registered for this will be able to access that. Just to thank you all again. It's a really interesting subject, and maybe we can revisit it in the deepest, darkest bit of the summer when it's very, very hot, and talk about what the hell to do about the overheated buildings as well. In the meantime, thanks again.